Thank you, Norman, for that introduction. I feel like I have a lot to live up to, and I will try. But I first want to state that I'm very grateful to be the Bosch Fellow of Public Policy here at the Academy. It's given me the opportunity to think through these ideas, and I'm also very grateful to you for coming so that I can share them with you. And I look forward to hearing what you think. It was her turn next, and she knew it was coming. Every day, people were getting called into the manager's office at the entrance to the plant, past the full-size model car that sat there, shiny and useless, like it was mocking them. A few people were prepared, and fewer people were trying to prepare. But most didn't even try. What was the point? Any job that was out there was already taken. Unemployment will barely help keep things together. You do all the right things and it doesn't matter. No one ever said that 11 years might end up meaning nothing. The manager didn't have much to say, and he knew it. He seemed ashamed, his index finger picking at his thumb's cuticle. She actually felt sorry for him. She tried making it easier for him by nodding when she remembered to show that she was following what he was saying. But her thoughts kept drifting home. Her son, Daryl. He was already angry, like she guessed teenagers are prone to get. General, indiscriminate anger. She felt his hatred for the world like she was partly to blame for it. But she knew he didn't mean it, although she could never tell him that, because it would only inflame his rage, as if he wanted to show her just how pure of origin it was and how wholly hateful the world really was. The manager was done talking and his hand was on her shoulder, which was slack and indifferent. She perked up with a distracted smile. Well, goodbye. At home, she found Daryl watching TV and she knew what that meant. You're in your senior year and you're almost finished. You're not going to finish if they keep having to send you home. They didn't send me home. I'd left because I'm done with this bullshit. I told you not to curse in this house. She surprised herself when she felt something round and sorrowful move up her throat, and she felt like crying. She tightened her jaw and hardened her eyes because she was afraid he'd only get angrier and say something really hurtful. Then it would turn out into another big fight, like that last one, only this time it would be even worse. The kind of fight that nothing comes out surviving. You will graduate, and I will make sure you do. I will go to school with you each day and sit behind you in the classroom and hold your hand if I have to. You wouldn't do that. Yes, I will, because I will make sure you graduate. Letting things roll over you until they wear you down to nothing is just as easy as taking up the determination to make something happen no matter what. Both ways are all or nothing, and they lay down straight paths to their ends. Nothing can change the way I raise my son, not even my son. She heard his bedroom door slam and his school pictures jumped a half-inch off the wall. Until it wasn't the front door slamming, there was still hope. Hope also came to the front door in the figure of a man who appeared almost from nowhere. Well, he was dressed and groomed and uprighted like many other men that were visiting schools around this time of year, every year, remaking many young men into their own image. She had no idea then that in a matter of months, the army would come to be so heartbreaking and confusing for her son and for her. She knew that if it weren't for the recruiter, Daryl would not have made it through high school, but she liked to think that he would have succeeded somehow anyway. He made regular visits, rapping on the front door with determined knuckles, coming to check that her son did his homework. Of course, she knew it was probably because the sergeant couldn't recruit him if he didn't, but still nothing made the man keep in touch with her when her son was sent on tour in Iraq. That's when she learned to hear the ring of his calls. Her son was sent out just before September 11th. I'm a sniper, Mom. I go into houses to raid them and pull people out. This is what he told her after the first tour. He learned to be general with his descriptions. He didn't say that while doing all that, he was also dodging bullets. and she didn't know how many people he had to kill. He's sensitive, like her. So they didn't talk about it, and she knew a part of him was grateful for it. She was grateful too. But when Daryl was home after his second tour, he was messed up. He started following with the wrong crowd. They were drinking, and she knew he was doing something else too because he was sniffing a lot and rubbing his nose. It was like now he was angry at something even bigger than the world. He was going to be called for a third tour, this time in Afghanistan. She could see him trying to blot out the days of waiting. He stayed out later and slept into the afternoons. She did the waiting for him. He got the call on Monday afternoon. They were both home. She recognized the ring. When he put the phone down, he didn't have to tell her anything about what was said. That night, he didn't go out, and he wouldn't talk to any of his friends if they called. He ate dinner while staring at the TV, and then he got up to go to bed. Not caring whether he wanted it or not, she hugged him. His arms hung slack at his sides for a time before he hugged her back quickly. But it was real. She wasn't going to cry. 2 days passed, and she was prepared to say goodbye to him again. But then the phone rang. He answered it. The caller did most of the talking. Then he hung up the phone. I don't have to go to Afghanistan anymore. They say they have everyone they need. Even though it was all he said, no sigh of relief, no smile, even though he was already a changed man, she cried because Daryl was just barely saved. When he was just a little boy, his daddy died. Lucas was 9 years old, and he didn't know what was going to happen. Each day he might go to school, he might not. When he got up in the morning, sometimes his mother would be asleep, and sometimes she wouldn't be home. Other times she'd be home and wide awake all night with whatever guy they were staying with. Lucas would look at the guy sitting with his mom on the sofa, wary, but wanting to trust him. The guy would look back at him with a flicker of guilt in his eyes, which quickly narrowed in defiance, so Lucas ended up avoiding him. Lucas, you eat some breakfast, all right? Lucas didn't respond with more than a nod, knowing she was already back to fooling with the guy. From the kitchen, he could hear them talking fast about something half-hushed. He found the Cap'n Crunch on the counter, and from the dirty pile in the sink, he pulled a spoon and a bowl. He was going to school that day. Other than that, he didn't know what was going to happen. Days passed, some much longer than others, and each one only gradually becoming familiar the more of them came. He could tell, for example, when his mom wanted him to mind his own business, and that could be a long time. He could also tell when she wanted to give him a big hug. Most of the time it was her being sorry for making him mind his own business for so long. But it was still like the big, never-ending hug she gave him when she didn't need to be sorry. Anyway, the hugs made him squirm because he was just too old for that. But he secretly liked it. That didn't happen much anymore. She was either out or she was back here and with the guy, or with their friends that come in and sit down at the table and bust out their syringes and draw up dope at the table, just jamming their arms. When they were done doing all that, and if his mom saw him on the couch watching TV, she'd get it into her head to show him off to her friends. But that usually didn't last long because they soon got back to talking conspiratorially about people he didn't know and negotiating around the battered wooden box at the center of the table. It was one Thursday afternoon that he was playing in the yard that a white bus stopped out front and a guy got out. Hey, little guy, your mommy home? He was a church man, and by his unveiled eyes, Lucas knew it was okay to answer his question. Yeah, she's inside. We've been driving around here for miles and miles looking for people who want to go to church, and you're the first person we've seen. You want to go to church and talk with God? Lucas looked at him curious and interested. His eyes shifted to the white bus, noticing the ornate lettering on its side. He is yours and you are his. The man walked up to the screen door and knocked. "Ma'am, Preacher Carl Lime of Foothills Baptist Church calling." In a pink robe, Lucas's mother came to the door after a time and opened it to get a look at the man. "Something I can do?" "We want to know if you want to come to church. We have a bus and we can pick you up if need." "I'm not the church-going type." She was eager to get back to the sofa. "Well, would it be all right if we picked your boy up? He said he wants to go. What's your name, son?" "Lucas," his mother said before the boy could speak. "Well, he does what he wants. If he wants to go to church, let him go to church. What time are you bringing him home?" Preacher Carl Lime looked at Lucas, who sat there in the grass, feeling a jump of excitement. Yes, he didn't know what it was all about, but he thought, well, let's try it. "Well, all right, I'll be out here Sunday to pick you up." And with that, the preacher turned back to the pink-robed woman at the open screen door, but it was already shut and she had already receded back inside. Preacher Carl Lime drove out there in the middle of the country with that bus on Sunday, every Sunday. That preacher man baptized Lucas and saved him. That is, until his mother hauled him off to Palm Springs not more than 2 years later. Lucas should have followed his new, born-again Christian ways, but he's a sinner. He was already brought up into that drug-addicted life. His mother was dating a guy in Missouri who was out west staying with some people. It was some dope friends, and he decided they were going to settle down with them. Out in California, he started a small truck and tire business that was run, even Lucas knew, by nothing but drug addicts. It was ignorant. They call it working, but it isn't working. Go service a tire and it takes them fucking 10 hours? Come on. Man, it only takes a couple minutes. Jack the car up, take the tire off, get it off the rim, pull a new one on, and stick it back on. Wow. They went way off the deep end with that one. The guy had a trailer behind what was an old airplane hangar, and there was a pilot truck stop across the way. So whenever the guy was doing his tires, his mom was doing her thing. She was over there hooking at the truck stop. Meanwhile, back at the trailer, Lucas said to himself, hell, I can do whatever the fuck I want. The thought had long been on his mind, but his mother out there confirmed that that was the case. It was not that she'd necessarily disapprove of him using drugs. It was that he was using her drugs. And in that case, there was drugs everywhere. If she was doing all those guys for it and getting all twisted when she didn't have it, there must be something to it. It couldn't rightly be called an urge. It was more like an instinct. Well, then let me try what they're trying. He dipped into one of his mother's foil-wrapped stashes. He poured some of the powder on the side of his finger and snorted it, just like he'd seen his mother do 100 times. At first, the burn surprised him, so he held his nose with his hand. A couple of minutes later, he felt a bitter trickle down the back of his throat. Then everything stilled. But everything glittered. His breaths got shorter, but with each breath, so much was happening. His mind raced with excitement, except it was his whole body, even if he sat still. Then he could no longer sit still. He got up and paced the living room, looking at everything like it was new. He felt giddy, yet determined. But for what? He didn't know. But he got lost in his comic books, his sweaty fingers sticking to the glossy pages whose images leapt out at him like exclamations that animated the superhero's speech bubbles. The density of 1,000 piled-up moments suddenly became sensate when he heard the voices of his mother and the guy at the door, as if cutting through a barrier of woolly insulation. But Lucas didn't jump with guilt. He felt only like he had made a virtuous discovery, like the right way to be and the right world to live in. What could be wrong with this? It didn't take long at all for his mother to notice that there was something different about him. So Lucas just said it. I snorted some of your meth. The words, oddly loud and hurried, sounded to him like they were coming from some other kid. There was a pause, and it felt like things would tip in any which way. His mother looked at the guy and smiled, holding up to him the palm of her hand. Then she turned to his son. Well, okay, you want some more? That other kid nearly shouted, yes, and that's how everything became. You want to do this? Yes. You want to do that? Yes. You want to do this? Yes. He never knew what was going to happen, and he liked it that way. He felt his entire body taken up, like something you read out of a book. It was extreme ecstasy. It was not knowing if you're fully there, if you're being lifted up. It was everything. It was like, wow, I want it again. I don't care how I get it. I just want it again. His mom and her old man were fighting again, but this time it was different, taking it to a new pitch. Get what you want to take with you, Lucas, because we're leaving. And you make sure you take your dope too. She shouted the words at him, but they were really for the guy. In the month leading up to the fight, Lucas was sneaking around the room regularly, and because of it, he had his own stuff. And being that young in age, it didn't take him much anyway. That's how no one noticed that some was missing sometimes. I said, you're going to share that dope, Lucas. The guy was angry, but his mother was angrier, and that and the dope gave Lucas the courage to stand up to him. It's mine, and I'm keeping it. They moved from Palm Springs to Desert Center the week before, and when they got out there, it was nothing out there. That's what made their leaving extreme. His mother had the rolling black suitcase open on the bed and was stuffing clothes in it. He pulled t-shirts and shorts and pants and underwear and socks from the dirty piles in the corners of the room and stuffed them in there too. Those in his comic books. Yeah, well, go on ahead. I don't fucking want you two around here no more. Trailer whore. And you, fuck you, you faggot thief. They walked on the highway under a hot orange disk that refused to budge in a peerless sky. The road was straight and blank. It led them out of Desert Center and out of anything attended by humans. They walked until the boundaries of their world fell away, but for the dusty shoulder beneath their feet. Their shuffling, breathing set them so squarely on that desert flatness that even if the earth went reeling off its axis, they wouldn't have noticed. Shuffling, breathing. Lucas pulled the black suitcase and his mother carried a small cage holding a whiskery white rat, like a lab rat. She raised it from a baby and she took it wherever they went. It was probably 10 hours before they even seen a car. It came cutting through the silent haze of some clockless hour. A green Escalade approached them and stopped up ahead. They shambled up to it, and Lucas could see a man about his mother's age. He was in the driver's seat, and Lucas thought, what kind of guy is this one going to be? God was ultimately merciful because with the heat, no water, and the exhaustion, he didn't know if they could have gone on walking. But Lucas was still a kid, and then his mother, well, anything could happen. Before, when they were in Missouri, he couldn't fight off that guy who did those things to him. But that was his own fault. He's a sinner after all. In the future, Lucas would look back at that moment and think, okay, could this woman get beaten and raped? I mean, he just stole pussy from a prostitute. How does that work? She would have probably propositioned him before he even beat her. Then the guy'd be like, well, okay, here's some money, here's a ride. You normally have a choice to say, should I get in the vehicle with this guy? Should I stick this dirty needle in my arm? And sometimes when you're under the influence, choice, reasoning, and common sense all goes out the window. Hell, I don't have a choice. I'm already high. Let's go ahead and do it. In 2013, the Doe Run primary lead smelter, the last in the US, closed. Doe Run is located in Missouri's old lead belt. Lawsuits by residents against the company had been largely ineffective until a St. Louis environmental lawyer discovered that the EPA had not kept up with its mandated 5-year reviews of the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for lead. She filed suit against the EPA, which as a result revised the National Air Pollution Standard for lead by lowering the threshold by a factor of 10. Faced with the new standard, Doe Run concluded it wouldn't be an acceptable financial risk if they attempted to build and operate a cleaner, compliant smelter. So they made the business decision to shut it down definitively. As a result of the closure, 30 tons less lead is extracted from the area, and 100,000 tons less of carbon dioxide are released into the atmosphere each year. The arrest of primary lead mining operations in the area comes strikingly late, given the decades of deindustrialization that mining has undergone in the old lead belt, the iron belt, the coal belt, and their related industries. In the 150 years of its operations, Doe Run has contributed to the mass contamination of soil, groundwater, and rivers throughout the area. Remediation began a couple years ago, but the insults of long-term exposure to residents are irreversible. Overexposure to lead is linked to impairments of cognitive development among fetuses and children aged 7 and under. It's also linked to an increased incidence of attention deficit disorder. These potential effects are linked, in turn, to poor performance in school and diminished earning potential in the job market. Deindustrialization has had an impact on this part of the US, as it has on many other parts, in a national economy that has shifted focus from manufacturing to post-industrial forms of labor. This area has seen layoffs from major employers like Chrysler, McDonnell Douglas, and Budweiser. Fast food chains like Arby's, Sonic Burgers, and Burger King, big box stores like Lowe's, Home Depot, and Walmart, and little box stores like Dollar Tree and Family Dollar have filled some of the gaps, but they scarcely offer living wages or provide a cushion against ever possible contingencies. But deindustrialization is an ongoing phenomenon, and it is one that entails far more than a change in job market composition. Deindustrialization is better restated as a late stage in a long industrial era, or late industrialism. According to Kim Fortune, late industrialism means deteriorating industrial infrastructure, landscapes dotted with toxic waste ponds, climate instability, and the incredible imbrication of commercial interest in knowledge production, in legal decisions, in governance at all scales, while the desire for toxic goods persists in motivating manufacture. Late industrialism impels a reckoning with the toxic inheritance of people born in an injurious ecology who have debilitated learning and thinking capacity and who are intoxicated by the corrupted dream of honest work, fair pay, and a decent life. A dream that is confabulated through the tight coupling of natural, technical, political, economic, social, and discursive systems, all of which are aging, often overwrought, ossified, and politicized. A young man, the son of a woodwoman, who died and left her husband and her child to fend for themselves in the world, became himself a woodman and took care of his father, chopping wood until the day he died. When he was all on his own, the woodman decided that he did not want to grow lonely, so he sought a mate. He then found love in a tree stump. The tree stump told the woodman it would marry him, but if he built a house for them both to live in. Inspired, the woodman immediately set to work. But the tree stump worked as a chopping block in the house of a wealthy woman who did not want to let it go. And so the wealthy woman went to the witch of the east and offered him a cow and 2 sheep to prevent the marriage of her servant, the tree stump, to the woodman. Persuaded by the gifts, the witch enchanted the woodman's axe. And as the woodman vigorously chopped wood for the new home he planned to share with his mate, his axe swung not at the wood, but at his own leg. At first the woodman despaired. What good is a woodman with only 1 leg? But then he had the idea to ask the tinsmith to fashion for him a replacement. The tinsmith indeed built for him a new leg, and thus remade the woodman set out again to making his house. The witch of the east was irked, so he enchanted the axe again and caused the woodman to chop off his other leg. But the woodman again took himself to the tinsmith and had him make him a tin leg to replace what he had lost. The witch, now enraged, made the axe chop off each of the woodman's arms. The woodman, however, found that the tinsmith could replace those 2. Unrelenting, the witch cut off the woodman's head, and now the woodman was sure that he was done in. But the tinsmith had just been passing by, and so he made for him a head of tin to replace what he had lost. Believing he had beaten his enemy, the woodman set back to work on his house, now with renewed vigor. But the witch would not be beat. Once again, he enchanted the axe so that it split the woodman's body in half. But the woodman found a solution for that too. He went to the tinsmith, and the tinsmith made him a body. But the tin woodman had no heart, and he no longer loved the tree stump. However, the tin woodman's body shone in the sun, and of that he was proud. If his axe slipped again, it would not harm him, and that made him bold. The only danger was rain, for if the tinman's iron joints rusted, he would be paralyzed. He therefore carried with him at all times an oil can. Just a few drops, it means mobility, it means life. Frank Baum's great American fairy tale, The Wizard of Oz, which he wrote in 1900, has only been celebrated in its filmic form, which was released by MGM in 1939. The book was condemned by fundamentalist Christians. In the movie, Dorothy dreams of Oz, but in the book, Oz is a fantastic world that is just as real as and contiguous with Kansas. In the book, Kansas is not a black and white pastoral opposed to the glittering emerald city of modern capitalism. Instead, Kansas is gray and barren. According to Stuart Culver, to whom many of these thoughts I'm indebted, nature on the plains reduces everything to the same gray indifference. Baum was a reporter for the newspaper The Saturday Pioneer of South Dakota, and he documented the financial and natural disasters that inspired in areas like South Dakota and Kansas the agrarian resistance to the corporate organization of farming and the financialization of the economy. The resistance crystallized in the populist belief that agrarian life was morally superior to industrial production. I feel like I'm in Kansas. Parched. The family farm produces with direct labor commodities that satisfy direct needs. Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz in the aftermath of populism's failure. In his emerald city, the color green, which everyone sees through the glasses that they are required to wear, Green is an evanescent quality that trumps the potential material value of all objects. In the Emerald City, people pursue an abstract quality that is only manifest in the moment before objects are put to use. Baum did not disavow the sparkle of industrial capitalism. He believed that industrial consumerist desire was one expression of a fundamental lack that made humans who they are, that is, incomplete desiring machines. In 1900, he also published The Art of Decorating Dry Goods Windows, in which he elaborated techniques for shop window advertising. In his subsequent Oz storybooks, the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow serve as figures closely resembling mannequins. If these stories are to be read as allegories about successful shop window advertising, they tell readers that a mannequin must manifest completion while dramatizing lack. It must incite in consumers a desire for an evanescent object that will complete them while simultaneously deferring their satiation. In the filmic version of The Wizard of Oz, Buddy Ebsen originally played Tin Man, but the aluminum powder in his makeup sent him to the hospital for 2 weeks and nearly killed him. He was replaced by Jack Haley, and the aluminum powder was replaced with aluminum paste to prevent inhalation. Haley also suffered poisoning, but he stuck with his role.
Students and working professionals often need to complete inordinate amounts of work in order to be successful. Energy drinks and working professionals often need to complete inordinate amounts of work in order to be successful throughout the day. Energy drinks are used to help the individual finish his work at least. Energy drinks help with sustainability throughout the day. Never stop improving. Monster Energy. Nutrition is the only one for me. Try it, risk Lowe's. You'll love it. Never stop improving. Try the extra large, extra cheese world we live in. McDonald's has a renovation. I'm loving what will you gain? The extra large, extra cheese world we live in. Crunk Energy Sticks. Sprinkle on top. No water. No mixing. When you lose. Inspiration doesn't favor those who sit still. On top. It dances for the courageous. Toyota. Let's go. Inspiration doesn't favor those who sit still. It dances for the courageous.
Allegories were once alluring because they promised to light up inchoate objects and trace unimagined connections and resolve ambiguities and paradoxes of human and more than human and abiotic life. Modern allegories hold promise, but they also reveal their own failure to cohere. Whereas symbols present themselves as organic forms indivisible from their transcendent ground, allegories disintegrate in the excess of meaning generated by their heterogeneous fragments. Meth cooking similarly throws into relief the unstable composition of a life. Like any modern allegory, it is an aporia. It leads the way out of workaday failures while lapsing back into them. It takes a toxic American dream to its logical extreme.
There's a simpler way too as well. I mean, you've got cold packs. You go pop the cold pack and you put it on your sore muscles. Now those are actually full of ammonium nitrate. You take that ammonium nitrate and you put it in a bug sprayer. This is a lot less dangerous too. That's the concepts of it from back then to now to make things easier. Back then, actually, whenever I was 17, cooking with a tank. Yeah. to now. Yeah. Using a bug sprayer to make anhydrous.
There's no place like home. The EPA voluntary guidelines for methamphetamine laboratory cleanup state the following. Many of the chemicals used in methamphetamine manufacture are already present in most homes. With this in mind, meth is often used as an indicator for the effectiveness of cleanup activities. So what that means is the activities needed to clean up meth are sufficient for cleaning up the other chemicals. With this statement, the EPA opens the door of the ordinary home and leaves us all lingering at the threshold. Shire was founded in 1986 by veteran executives of the pharmaceutical industries. We went public in 1987 and started to pursue what is now our trademark strategy, finding new applications for existing compounds. Our latest example of this is the use of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, medication, Adderall, for depression. We're one of the UK's largest specialty biopharmaceutical companies. We have three main operating segments: specialty pharmaceuticals, human genetic therapies, and regenerative medicine. Our specialty drug roster includes ADHD treatments like Vyvanse and Adderall, Intuniv, Equisim, and Daytrana. Our sales forces target specialist physicians, and the majority of our sales are in North America, about 70%. Our revenues increased in 2012 to $4.7 billion, especially in the sales of Vyvanse and Intuniv. In 2014, they were $6 billion. At the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, I described us as a serial acquirer. Shire is a highly acquisitive company with a stated goal of becoming a $10 billion earner by 2020. Some of our past deals include its 2011 acquisition of advanced biohealing Shire Regenerative Medicine for $750 million. The acquisition gave Shire Dermagraft, a cryopreserved human dermal substitute approved by the FDA. A question that was posed to me this last time was the following: what's the situation on Vyvanse in the 10 by 20 plan in terms of generalization? Well, I think with Vyvanse, as you saw, there was an event on the IP side in 2014 that basically confirmed that we have very strong patents. We feel very comfortable with that, because in that period, that's not an issue that we worry about in that particular situation. The other thing that we're focused on in ADHD is our more long-acting new ADHD medication that will probably need some additional clinical data, on which we could also expand that label. That's our focus, to continue to build and grow. Our head of business development always says, business development is on everyone's radar all the time because we don't have the R in R&D. Shire is more like a holding company whose leaders manage portfolios. Rather than focus our resources on risky in-house development, we acquire products in research phase 2 or 3. We conduct quick clinical trials and we bring drugs to market. To do this, we open up the marketing channel between supply and demand. Rather than focusing on drug efficacy, we aim at value creation through the discovery of new uses for a given compound. We also maintain an infrastructure of shadow experts to trump the findings of dissenting professionals. With the help of these experts, we medicalize everyday moods and emotions, what in layman's terms is called something like disease mongering. But we also use direct-to-consumer advertising, brand positioning in the field of competing drugs, and still more strategies implemented at the earliest points in this channel at the stages of research, development, and obtaining FDA approval. Now I'm going to address something before it arises in the Q&A, and this is all I'm going to say about it. Last year, the US Department of Justice alleged that Shire made claims about Adderall XR without clinical data to back them up, including that the drug would improve academic performance, reduce unemployment, prevent criminal behavior, and normalize children by reducing their symptoms to the levels of non-ADHD affected children. We've settled that case with a sum of $56.5 million, but we don't admit to any wrongdoing. In 1988, just 2 years after our founding, we acquired the rights to Adderall, which had previously been marketed as an obesity drug under the name of Obitrol. In 2009, the last year of our patent, our revenues were over $3 billion, and Adderall produced nearly half of that revenue. By way of a single pill, Shire has transmuted into a multi-billion-dollar empire. palpitations, elevation of blood pressure, sudden death, myocardial infarction, dryness of mouth, unpleasant taste, diarrhea, constipation, gastrointestinal disturbances. Anorexia and weight loss may occur as undesirable effects. Psychotic episodes, overstimulation, restlessness, dizziness, insomnia, euphoria, dyskinesis, dysphoria, depression, tremor, headache, exacerbation of motor and phonic tics, and Tourette's syndrome, seizures, stroke, urticaria, rash, hypersensitivity reactions including angioedema, serious skin rashes including Stevens-Johnson syndrome and toxic epidermal necrolysis, impotence, changes in libido. Now, alchemy is an art which is necessary and must exist because it represents the art of Vulcan. Now, God created all things. He created something out of nothing. All things are created as far as we know them, but not as far as they should be. That is alchemy, and the foundryman is called Vulcan. Whatever the fire does is alchemy, likewise in the kitchen and in the oven. Thus, it is also with medicine. It is created by God, but incomplete and buried in the dross. The dross must be removed, and then the medicine is available. That is alchemy and the office of Vulcan. The 16th century Paracelsus was unique among alchemists because he created a new popular alchemy that was spectacular, public, and inspired excitement and hostility. He addressed alchemy's power to heal. He was an iconoclast who actively fought against the church, the academy, and the private interests of businessmen. He favored popular knowledge and practical experience over doctrine. Alchemy inspired invention, skepticism, and speculation, fueling the idea of a secret to be discovered. Chemistry helped teach people to perceive a clean, legible world with no cause for wonder or alarm. Modern science began when scientists accepted the role of guardians of an infantile public that it spoke to in the register of abstract discursive reasoning. This Bernadette Benso-Vincent and Isabelle Stenger's right. Today, chemical industries are fortified by a seductive, productivist, essentialist logic, a positive perspective that assumes that things are what they are and what they're intended to be, and that they are their essence. Meth cooks find these things at Walmart, whose marks on Missouri are old and deep. Every day, the world's largest retailer calls out affirmatively to its customers, save more, live better, Ever Ready, Black Flag, Red Devil Lie, Sudafed. Meth is the creation of the late industrial magnum opus, and it is simultaneously the philosopher's stone, the white, yellow, or orange-brown powder that can transmute base matter into gold. It is the elixir that gives you more life. It makes you the demiurge, making your world anew. Sudafed, Energizer batteries, liquid Drano, and aluminum foil. They have occulted energies. Human neurochemistry runs on firing neurotransmitters that touch down on ready receptors. Futures, derivatives, and other financial instruments circulate at microsecond speeds, generating fields of possibility where products, industries, and landscapes thrive and die. When these heterogeneous forces are imagined as a single embodied entity, a chimera is born. A chimera is a fantastical form conjured through the back and forth movement between sublimation and deposition, the change from solid to vapor to solid again, each time bypassing the liquid state. Time is out of joint. The base matter of late industrial alchemy is transmuted into the lightning clouds of algorithmic finance, and the molecular unconscious is awakened.
Yeah, okay. But then when the bomb's done, like let's just say, these are the cops. They bust, poof. They they scatter. The light comes on. But then when the fucking cops are gone and the lights are out, boom, we're back. It's fucking ignorant, but that's how it works.
Lucas is now in his mid-20s and currently living in a Missouri state prison for meth manufacture. He was talking about an explosion, the act of God that many meth cooks anticipate, the act of God that will tell them to quit or will extinguish them. Cooks live and work fueled by this fear, internalizing the risk of combustion or a police bust, living it like a high. The shake and bake lab is highly volatile. Lithium strips peeled from batteries are dropped in a bottle filled with Coleman camping fuel, mixed with the beads of instant cold packs, and red devil lye and pseudoephedrine, which is ground in a coffee grinder. The mixture reacts, and shaking the bottle speeds the reaction. Pressure builds up quickly, but Gatorade bottles are thick and ribbed, allowing the bottle to expand. But there's a limit point when the cooks have to burp the bottle by opening the lid to release some of the pressure and then closing it again in cook-by-feel intervals. So imagine shaking and burping this queer baby. The bottle may let in moisture and ignite the lithium. This burns a hole in the bottle and turns it into a blowtorch that eventually explodes. Lucas says that it summons the kind of fire that nothing comes out surviving. Before he got caught, Lucas cooked meth for many years. Most of the time, he was just keeping up with his addiction. He started using when he was 10 because his mother used it. She sold sex to truck drivers. She died last year of liver failure and cancer, but for him, she's still very much alive. There's only two things I'm afraid of, and that's anhydrous and my mother. Lucas was referring to the farm fertilizer anhydrous ammonia, a staple in the American heartland and elsewhere for putting nitrogen, essential for plant growth, into the soil. Anhydrous ammonia is the highly corrosive gas that has caused several calamities, most recently in the town-thundering explosion of West Texas. Meth cooks like Lucas stole the chemical for use in the once popular two-pot method. That recipe is lodged in the golden years of cooking the clean way, where your chemicals weren't promiscuously mixed all in the same plastic bottle. The circulation of anhydrous has always been controlled. Cooks say they love the challenge of obtaining it. Danny from nearby Quincy, Illinois, said he used to get all hopped up on that Mission Impossible thing, wearing black and crawling on his belly through the fields at night to tap a tank of anhydrous and capture the compressed gas in a propane tank. The trick is to avoid contact with the freeze-burning liquid or the deadly white mist it becomes when depressurized. Manufacturers call the anhydrous tank a nurse tank. Meth cooks sneak up to it for a toxic milking. Some call this chemical industrial mama the great white buffalo, like the rare animal revered by the Lakota and other First Nations. This white buffalo is also indigenous to heartland natural resource mythology. It's valued for its rarity and its sacred medicinal powers. Pigs and cockroaches, the meth cook and his queer baby, the explosive sexing mother and her hopped up and hungry truckers, the great white buffalo and its caustic milk. These are some of the protagonists in Heartland's queer capitalism. This non-hetero, repro capitalist desiring production begins with the alchemical transmutation of base materials, everyday consumer products like Walgreens instant cold packs, ready batteries, and Sudafed, into a precious nostrum to cure all ills, the ills of precarious living, underemployment, insecurity, and the internalized feeling of being underproductive. Meth intensifies novelty seeking and reward seeking, which is experienced as an anticipatory high. This feeling is distinct from consumatory pleasure. It's instead the thrilling sense of alertness, heightened interest, motivation, ability, and the power that primes the body to forage and seek objects of desire. Meth activates the seeking system, and in Missouri it fires up bodies to play, fuck, or be more industrious at the factory, or the construction site, or the ironworks, or in the meth lab, where Walmart products are yet again enlivened. Users stay awake for days, sometimes weeks. They feel exuberant, invincible, and free of all obstacles like hunger, fatigue, depression, boredom. They get more life. To tweak is to bug out and to become other. A tweaker gets amped and gets onto something, an object of interest or fear, the materiality of an object, or materiality itself, and won't let it go. Fired up and looking for somewhere to go, the tweaker plants his tweak in a task. Inspired and interested, she forages and burrows and hoards in rhythmic perpetuity. When it's aimed at the job, roofing, cement, assembly line, foundry, things can finally work out well. With your strong back and weak mind, you can work longer. Finally, beyond what dulls, something good feels within reach. But when the tweak is unleashed, they say it can tear shit apart. That's when you start clucking, bent over like a chicken with your ass in the air and your face in some business making a mess of things. An at-home car mechanic, a plumber, an electrician, a mason too, a DIY frenzy. Many tweakers work on their cars, motorcycles, their bicycles throughout the night. The project they had in mind gets deferred by the details. The muffler needs to be cleaned. The wrenches need to be sorted. The same colored screw as this one needs to be located. Other times, the electronic appliances inside the house require closer examination. Screws, pins, springs, gears, wires, clips, circuit boards. A bug could be lodged among these parts. Someone could be listening. Many devise creative ways to hide their equipment. Hollowed out rubber tree stumps and papier-mâché boulders that conceal the plastic buckets of an outdoor meth lab. A hole carved into the center of a bed's platform in an extended stay hotel room where you can rent, cook, and check out and back in again without carrying around the equipment. One cook assiduously dynamo-taped everything in his garage, including his meth lab. Big monkey wrench, medium monkey wrench, small monkey wrench, jar for final process, acetone for final step. If you pay attention, you can spot the material artifacts of tweaking when you're driving around town. In the late industrial Midwest, yards of stuff are common: cars and parts, building materials, broken furniture, appliances, and plastic children's toys. But the stuff of tweaker projects is rigged with bent energy. In a tweaker yard, configurations of dubious domesticity take shape, like this washing machine, whose water heating mechanism is a rusty air conditioner grill. In a tweaker home, the boundaries between garage, bathroom, and living room dissolve, and its objects and materials promiscuously coalesce. The cook is the tweaker project par excellence. It is the great work. It demands of the alchemist that he ply the base matter of mass consumer and industrial chemical landscapes. Walmart, Walgreens, Dollar Trees, Lowe's, Home Depot, to enliven its occulted value. Liquid plumber, Coleman fuel, Walgreens instant cold packs, ever-ready batteries, Gatorade. An occult covetousness that knows that if treated right, these things will turn stone to star and celestial fire to earthly delights. Biochemical and industrial chemical exuberance. A world escalates and you tilt into it. You become beside yourself, dispersed across the media that make you. You tweak, entrained to the soothing rhythms of busyness. Machinic life. Meth cooks perform a détournement of industry, an allegory of late industrial world compositioning with interchangeably human, more than human, and abiotic quasi-objects, which according to Michel Serres, are part subject because subjects cannot exist without objects. Homes double as laboratories, radically transformed and transforming matter and making. Through leakage, excretion, depletion, and recombination, forms of life, life forms, and non-life mix and tangle. Meth cooks simultaneously step up and slow down the cycle of mass production, consumption, self-production, while speeding towards its ultimate effects. They live the moment when time, demented and wild, breaks away from the treadmill of events like an escaping vagabond and runs shouting across the fields. When a meth lab explodes, it brings the secret life of the DIY chemist into view. Ordinarily, an exploded view is a technical drawing, one that exposes the parts of a body in their partial decomposition, which is different from decay, as if exploded from an interior center. Designs and instruction manuals use exploded views to represent the ideal state of an object and its parts in the idealized spaces of geometry. Exploded views inspire confidence through the aesthetics of precision, complexity, cohesion, and completeness. They can explain what makes an object whole by showing where each and every one of its parts belongs and what it does. Exploded views that explain such things foreclose further inquiry with synoptic tautologies. They efface the mixed temporalities through which materials interact, and they shore off all that's entangled with these exploded parts. That is, the materials and processes that extend beyond the view. This sort of exploded view reinscribes a theory of matter that is more idealistic than material. As Bruno Latour has written, it takes the idea of what things in themselves should be, that is, primary qualities, and then never stops gawking at the miracle that makes them resemble their geometrical production in drawings. Such exploded views are rhetorically persuasive and awe-inspiring, even baffling, operating equally well in advertisements, and this is an advertisement, and in artworks like those of Todd McClellan and Damian Ortega. And these artworks, ironically, lose touch with matter. In the case of the meth lab, the exploded view can perform an alternative theory of matter. When the home's secret life work combusts, what one sees and smells and tastes are in ordinary homes everyday products, but their just so qualities are compromised. The product's chemical compositions are more palpable, but so too is their opacity. The vast chemical and metal, industrial, and retail apparatus that normally is flattened out in legible forms, like labeling and packaging, like that of Reynolds Wrap, itself a packaging that gives more life in the staff of life, and longer life too. R.J. Reynolds wanted to enlist his product in the work of sustaining life in the American home. Meth cooks ball up pieces of aluminum foil and drop them in the bottle of muriatic acid to produce hydrogen chloride gas and turn home-cooked meth into white crystalline ice. Some put meth on a small piece of foil. They heat it up from below and smoke it. It's called a foilie. The theory of matter that becomes palpable in the busted or combusted meth lab isn't really theoretical at all. It is material materialism, or base materialism. When the meth lab is busted or combusts, it's not the DIY chemistry of an illicit economy that's made sensible. More importantly, most meth cooks make meth for personal use and then some, using their meager profits to pay for the next batch. If anything, an exploded meth lab makes sensible a formal economy enhanced by DIY pharmacology, a formal economy where the most precarious, those who are already dead, who live with death, repeatedly self-immolate with the accursed share in hand. Georges Bataille called the accursed share the uncapturable excess of what we commonly perceive as the economy. It is the erotic extensive energies, the vital differences that accumulate like a cancer if not irrecuperably squandered. In this general economy, the restrictions of utility and obsessive accumulation are ditched for unproductive, non-teleological expenditure. Expenditure is the release of heterogeneous energy that cannot be harnessed. Its only true efficiency is the exuberant undoing of the self in the name of no thing, in a sovereign act of godless abandon. A meth explosion is the ecstatic sacrificial incarnation that Bataille seemed to imagine. The embers of matter desire are stirred by rogue consumption and disorderly base materialism. They are then somatized as dysregulated affect, a meth-ignited dopaminergic frenzy, and then they blast apart as desiring production. The general economy laced through the home meth lab transacts across the organic and synthetic, sacred and befouled, living and dead. In this economy, time speeds up, wrenching bodies into another time, one perhaps entirely in sync with the synthetics of everyday middle American consumer economy and its industrial chemical apparatus. I've picked through many, many busted and combusted meth labs, and I've explored lives entangled with them. I've deciphered from the allegorical fragments a tale of late industrial dispossession. But like any modern allegory, this one is also unstable and can also be interpreted otherwise. Exploded or busted meth labs make sensible in grotesque hyperbole the contours of an elaborate, ordinary biotechnical gathering. They allegorically exacerbate what happens in slower decompositional form among us. Thank you. So I think I'm fielding my own questions, which is totally fine, what I like. Yeah.
Could you give us a quick deconstruction of how this was constructed? So the voices that we're hearing, are these transcripts of interviews? Are they fictional? Is it a mix between them? So just let us see behind the curtain.
Yeah, I'm happy you asked that question because, yeah, the recordings are interviews. All those recordings are interviews with a single person, we'll call him Lucas, that I spoke to while he was in prison. And he recounted everything that you heard also in my own voice. But those are transcripts that are completely faithful and just tweaked, to use a good word, tense-wise so that they were storied and brought to a present tense. I embellished with a few details when there was something lacking, like the pink robe of his mother, for example. But otherwise, I've been very careful to stick with the transcript. So yes, I have many recorded interviews and also a lot of informal conversations. Some recorded, some not.
Thank you.
Yep.
Since this was not exactly a documentary on the meth lab scene, can you just give a little bit more background? I mean, the specific thing that I'm interested in is, I mean, is this part of the hard drug scene that is also the object of very, focused drug enforcement, or is this a scene that is somehow tolerated by the authorities, or they've given up on it? It is more private. Can you just shed a little light on
Sure.
that aspect?
Yeah. So you may have seen some statistics. They went by a little quickly, but the area that I studied was the so-called meth capital of the U.S., which is also based on fraught statistics. Statistics don't really represent reality, and I did discover exactly how they are distorted. So that county that I focused on has a lot of resources and prides itself in also achieving higher numbers of busts. They get national exposure. They've been on television. There's also a reality TV show that was launched and then didn't quite make it. They have a dedicated public prosecutor who only wants to bust meth labs and ignores other crimes at that expense. But, so anyway, that's just to describe statistics. But yes, there is a lot of address from law enforcement, but the problem is so widespread and cyclical. People, while they're waiting to be prosecuted because they're not considered violent criminals that need to be incarcerated while awaiting trial, and the courts are backed up, they continue. And it's a powerful addiction. So prison is also an opportunity to get treatment. So they're not getting treatment, they're not getting whatever prison is supposed to offer otherwise. And the authorities are completely taxed and underpaid. So it's quite bleak. And so hardcore, yes, hardcore addiction, it's a total lifestyle, and it's a total ecology. Yes.
Could you please tell us how much meth is spread amongst average people? Is it consumed like alcohol or weed?
So average as in who? Different.
Like us here.
You could ask them. I think it's more widespread than you would imagine.
No, is it just for a certain group of people? Amongst the people living in the rural areas?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question, because meth has a different identity in different regions and different countries. And so in the region that I studied, it's considered a so-called white trash drug, lower classes white, not any other ethnicity, not any other social class, although that may be changing. But in urban areas in the United States that I've looked at, it's anyone. There is no, it's equal opportunity. There's no specific class stigma on meth. And it's used in different ways. So men who have sex with men will use meth to have these marathon sex parties, for example. People who like to go out to clubs and want to stay out all night, they may use some form of amphetamine and speed. And I have to talk to Norman more about this, about what's going on in Berlin. But there is heavy amphetamine use. And amphetamine and methamphetamine are the same class of drugs, which also includes legitimated prescriptions like Adderall, et cetera. So singling out crystal meth is not exactly productive as a way to think about who's using it, because anyone is using it in many different forms, is what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
So, I just will wait for the mic. Thanks. I wondered if you could say some more about all of those churches.
Yeah.
So, I guess they weren't saying anything useful, but I don't know what you're saying with them, actually.
Can I ask you what you think I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure, which is why I'm asking, but I mean, look, they were part of the general bleakness of the landscape. I assume there's something about hypocrisy there. I know that this is a part of the United States where there are a lot of churches.
Yeah.
I think that's about all I can give you.
Okay, no, thank you. I just wanted to know because I didn't present that in an expository mode to explain to you the purpose of religion in that area. And wasn't my focus, although I did attend, sorry? There were a lot of. Yes, absolutely. So I attended church on a weekly basis during my fieldwork there, which was, I don't know, maybe a total of a year and a half. And went to NA and AA meetings that were held in churches, and those are intrinsically religious ceremonies or practices. I did talk to meth users and cooks who talked about God as intervening in the work of the devil that brought them down with meth, or that succeeded, or that explosions or illness or death or addiction itself is correlated with some kind of religious iconography. I'm not exactly cynical, so here I'll expose. I'm not cynical about the role of religion at all in the lives of these people, because there's a total lack of resources, rehabilitation resources, and this is a rehabilitation resource. And yes, what struck me most about these church marquees was those messages seemed to be alluding to a shared problem, to struggles and shortcuts around those struggles. So to me, it was like an allegorical landscape speaking to both meth users and me. Yeah.
I have two rather different questions. One of the things I noticed about your pictures is that in almost all of them, the trees are bare, which contributes, of course, to the image of bleakness. I mean, is that deliberately chosen, or does it just happen to reflect the times where you were there? So that's the first question. The second question is rather different. It goes back to the question about class. Is there an underground economy behind all of this? Are there people who are actually setting up in business? They've got successful recipes, they're good at supplying, or is it so much on the do-it-yourself model that sort of capitalism doesn't penetrate the actual culture itself?
Yeah, I'll answer the last question first. There used to be more of a, let's say, distribution, manufacture for distribution, larger networks, more people collaborating. When there was another recipe that's called the two-pot, it's more complicated, requires more time, but the yield is much higher. With the new recipe, which emerged around 2008, the shake and bake, there's no need for all that equipment. It's mobile, it's quick, you could do it alone. And in this case, it ends up being just enough to supply one's own addiction. Most of the people that I talked to were not interested in becoming cartel leaders or anything like that. They were just simply addicted. And maybe they would supply some to their friends. Yes, there were a few cooks that did do more than that, but these are small-time people. Yes, there are economies that are bigger, and some of them are networked with like neo-Nazi gangs or already established gangs. And yeah. You had one more question, the trees. Thanks. Yeah, there were many iterations of these series of photos. I have an archive that's really big, and things fall out, and yes, that's unfortunate, because some of these places are very
poetic.
But I don't want to misrepresent this place. There are beautiful moments, beautiful places. I saw a question back there. Yeah.
I noticed that in the white trash narratives, there are three organizations that should provide structure to these groups. That was military, the church, and education. And would you say that all three of them fail to provide structure?
Absolutely. But the failure isn't always the blame of the institution itself. For example, the church. I mean, I know that the pastors in the church that I attended were on a shoestring budget. I don't know how they did it. And then there are many things that prevent people from making it to church. But yes, I would say even the failure is the basic conditions of late capitalism that are not viable. They're just simply not viable. I wouldn't even pinpoint a single institution. Oh, I'm supposed to do that, right? Sorry. Christina.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about the gender division of labor in the production, the manufacturing, and the distribution? We have a little view of the consumption, but not yet about production.
Yes.
And the dissemination.
The vast majority are male cooks. Part of that, and I've been trying to assess it, part of it is because you need to have physical strength to fight off whatever happens with competition or people trying to steal your drugs. But also it's already a very gendered local area. But it's an interesting twist because now the male becomes the home cook, you know, the domestic meister. So, but distribution, yes, there's a lot of sexism about meth use among women. It makes them horny and crazy, and they'll cheat on you, so you got to be careful. But men, you know, whatever. So, but anyone's taking it indiscriminately anyway.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Because I lost you with the queer baby.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to me that really the narrative that you were weaving was rather heteronormative. That the women were either bad mothers, witches, cooks actually, but never alchemists. The men in that narrative get to be alchemists. The women actually remain cooks, and so
Yeah.
it's a kind of domesticated cooking. Let me also add, though, that I wanted to preface my question with just an acknowledgement of the real brilliance of what you put together here. And I thought it had a cumulative force, and I think it takes a kind of a courage to work out. I'm sorry. I was commenting on the cumulative force of the opposite discourses that you brought together.
Thank you.
Yeah, and getting back to the religious marquees, I thought, in fact, I was struck by the tone of them, their mode, and I thought maybe you could, in fact, do more with the juxtaposition or difference or gap between the tone of the narratives that you started with, that fictive voice you created, and the tone of these the religious marquee. That is such a specifically weird and hysterical and funny, I think, and superego discourse. But that's another sort of comment. Getting back to the heteronormative. I'm not with you, Jason, with the queer baby.
Yeah.
I don't see anything queer about this at all.
Yeah, the only queerness that I see is that it's non-reproductive. It's a term that's been used, queer has been appropriated by everyone everywhere and overused, and I'm probably guilty of that. But in its use in the natural sciences, queer biology, for example, that's what I'm duplicating here. This is an abiotic coupling and reproduction, nurturing, milking. So is that in particular, those acts of, those interactive acts that are non-reproductive in any standard heteronormative sense. So that could be a long debate. Yes, please.
Is
Sorry,
the cooking itself, is it a hard thing to learn? Or and once you learn it, are there some amongst them who are supposed to do it especially well, so people try to learn from them.
It's become much easier with this shortcut recipe, which means it even invites people who are clumsy, like if I were to do it, it'd be a disaster. Because you do have to pay attention to that equilibrium between pressure that builds up and its release, the queer baby or the heteronormative baby. So that is actually the most important thing a lot of people cite. So it's being able to sense that phenomenology. But it is strikingly easy to make. The chemistry is very basic. It was more complicated in the past, but this is now sort of a democratizing revolution. And yes, there are some people that do it better, maybe, but most people can get a really good purity level. So there aren't necessarily so many stars, meth cook stars. Oh, I'm sorry, Tony had a question.
One thing that I was really struck by was the organization of your presentation, and I assume that the book itself is taking a similar form.
Maybe. Things are happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I felt like it almost you got this. I feel like it's a similar mode that you often see in nonfiction and in fiction in terms of traumatic narratives, where you have this often fragmentary style that gradually accretes a kind of shape over an extended period of time. And I was struck that it sort of, by the end of it, I almost felt like you yourself were the alchemist that had gathered all of these ingredients and had created this this concoction that we saw from all of these different cultural and political and sociological lenses. And I guess I was curious how the trauma of the subject matter itself you see reflected in the presentation of it tonight and in your book.
Yeah, I love that question. I'm really troubled by this material, and so I've been stuck with the book. And the book originally, and maybe it still is, going to be simply narratives like the initial ones, which are very long, but broken into maybe 6 or 7 pieces each, and I have about 10 to 15 of them, and I would be one of them. And they would all accrete over time and end up somewhere. Some of them entangle with each other, some not, which is a pretty radical thing to do in anthropology, but maybe things are changing. But yeah, these other forms are interesting to me too, where there is less, where there's a mix of, I don't know what, theory or expository form, essayist form with the literary. So I don't know. I'm open to suggestions.
Keep doing it.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for a creative and super interesting talk. At the end, you brought together how the explosions in the meth lab kind of highlight problems in everyday late capitalism and the materials involved in everyday precarious life. I didn't hear as much at the end the bringing in the other meth lab, Shire Pharmaceuticals, and the medication of lots of kids to behave better in school or do better in school, and the medication of lawyers and doctors to perform better, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could say more about that, and I kind of want to challenge you in future presentation, or maybe I missed it, but to bring that in, because that seems to fit really well with what you're saying at the end.
Yeah. I think I went way over time with this lecture, but yes, I would have added much more. And yeah, I have a lot to say about Shire Pharmaceuticals and other companies that produce legitimated amphetamines. Yeah, it's entirely normalized. The kinds of ways that people are using meth in Missouri and many other places reflect entirely the values of being productive, extracting more labor from oneself, extracting more time, feeling productive, feeling an anxiety about being underproductive, which is a productive anxiety for some reason, somehow. And the drug itself has that kind of phenomenology, neurologically speaking. It increases all kinds of, the term is escaping me, but increased heart rate, adrenaline levels. So physically, you actually experience anxiety in all of its manifestations. Shire isn't the only enemy here. It's also those who produce pseudoephedrine-based cold medicines, which contain the key source that needs to be harvested for meth production. So like Sudafed, for example. Those companies have lobbied heavily against any kind of legislation that would limit the circulation of these drugs. So it could have been addressed much, much earlier, but only recently has it become difficult to buy more than 2 boxes of cold medicine in the US per month. So, yeah, I could go on. I don't know that. Okay. Yes. Oh, okay. I guess we have to take one more question and then.
I actually have 2 questions. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to keep it short, but I was just wondering, you said that you did roughly 1.5 years of field work.
Yes.
In that area. So I was just wondering, could you give us an idea of how those days looked, or what those days looked like for you?
Yeah.
And kind of the struggles and the relationships you established with people in that region, and the effect it also had on you after, you know, what must have been an intense 1.5 years. And then the second part of the question, or the second question, is just relating to the comparative work you've done, comparing maybe some aspects of that, or the situation in Missouri, to Germany. You mentioned Berlin already, but also other parts in Germany that are more comparable to this region. So have you done more work on that?
Yeah, the answer to the second question is no. That's more Norman's area, but I am very interested, especially that I'm here, but it's a bad temptation to, just like a drug, to get into more field work. I have to write. But yeah, I'm very interested in what's going on in Germany because there is an uptick of use and circulation, and many people are talking about it. The other question, yes, the ordinary day there was pretty rough. There's a lot of failure in field work, and in that field work in particular, people get paranoid. They may be on your side and believe that we're doing this work in good faith, but then suddenly shut you out. People also die, they disappear. You get involved in their lives, and I have. I've been given heavy obligations that I don't know how to handle to do something about the problem, since I have the ability to speak to crowds like this or to write and be read. So that's the major burden for me that I'm still trying to figure out.
Well, apologies to all of you. I'm sure still have great questions, and many thanks to all of you who have asked questions, but I think we're really coming to the end of what we can all physically endure without the stimulation of some pretzels and wine. And so I would really like to thank you very much for this very interesting, and I'll come back to the cumulative force of impressions. I mean, for me it was a moving experience, and I think it'll keep working in me, the various different things we've heard and seen. Many thanks to you for making the introduction, and thanks for all the questions, and we can still spend some time together, so thank you very much.